Thanks for tuning in live to ProLine TV, the Our Lads Football Network, as we talk more NFL for 2025. We are through one full preseason weekend, plus the Hall of Fame game. And that includes, of course, this team, the LA Chargers, who are we going to talk about today here as we talk some AFC West football with Alex Insdorf. And Alex, of course, is the co-host of the Guilty as Charged podcast. So you can check them out on their channel. We have links in the description. So all you have to do is click the links on the description, go right there to the page. And also, of course, for Fansided, Bolt Beat. That is the name of the site. And that is, again, a fan-sided, what would you call it, Alex? A fan-sided contributor? A fan-sided?
Yeah, site.
Yeah. You're a contributor for the contributing Chargers site for Fansided, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, Alex has been with us the last few years, and it's time to talk some Chargers football. Thanks for doing this, Alex.
No problem. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do that. The preseason number 2 game in the books for the Chargers yesterday. I guess we'll start with that. Anything, and we'll get into other news in a little bit, but anything that come out of the game specifically, anything that the fans might have been a little bit excited about or not?
Yeah, I think Trey Lance has shown positive signs this preseason, potentially becoming the QB2 to Justin Herbert. They've needed a solid backup. They traded for Heineke last year, but I think Lance really can push for the QB2 job, just comparing their performances yesterday. And then I think the running back battle is pretty interesting on this team. Obviously some fantasy implications too with Najee Harris, maybe potentially out those first few games if they have this battle behind Omarion Hampton right now with guys like Kimani Vidal, Rocket Sanders, all kind of vying for those RB3, RB4 spots. Hassan Haskins in the mix as well.
Yeah, and let's jump right into the big story of the week with Slater going down. This is really the biggest injury, I believe, that we've heard about so far in the NFL this preseason. So I'm sure Chargers fans are very happy about that. This is not what you want to see. This is a huge blow. But luckily, they went out and drafted Joe Alt last year. And right. If he can make that, that seamless transition over to left tackle, then, maybe they'd be able to get over this. But it's still a huge loss.
Yeah, I think there's confidence in Joe Alt being able to hold down the left tackle spot. I do think in terms of what they wanted for the run game this year and getting to those heights as far as, obviously protection of Justin Herbert with 2 bookend Pro Bowl tackles. That's not what they're going to have with Slater and Alt left and right side anymore. But I think Alt is promising. I think he could take another step at that left tackle spot. Obviously familiar with playing the position in college quite a bit. So I think that'll just be about getting him more reps over there in the pros. But Trey Pipkins, I think, he's been a starter level tackle for the Chargers in the past, both in 2022, 2023 as well. Was part of the line that went to the playoffs in that 2022 season. So he can certainly, I think, give you starter level contributions, but definitely a step down from the duo that they, thought they would have this season in Alt and Slater.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of teams might have passed on a Joe Alt and went after a receiver, another tight end or whatever. And then maybe they would just be okay with having Pipkins as their tackle. Mm-hmm. But we know that Harbaugh, this is what he wants. He wants his offensive line to be considered one of the most physical and athletic, but just best overall lines. And that's how he wants to win football games. So that has to be a little bit disappointing. But again, it's only one season. Do you anticipate that there are going to be any? I know there's just not enough guys that are around at this time of year to just pick off anybody off the off the street. That's just not going to happen. Anybody relevant. So it's just a matter of maybe adding some additional depth as far as, because once Pipkins moves up, then you obviously lose a player on the bench.
Yeah, so they signed David Sharp, who's there, has been a swing tackle in quite a few places. I think when it comes time for cut down day in the NFL, I think that Joe Ortiz will probably monitor, who's maybe not going to make the roster on certain teams and sort of be involved in that. I don't think there's a big trade coming or something of those sorts, just because teams at this stage of the offseason aren't willing to give up offensive line talent, because they could easily have an injury like that happen to themselves. Offensive line depth, I think, is probably the toughest thing to acquire via, trade in the NFL like that. Certainly not as expendable as other positions like running backs and receivers and stuff like that. So I think they'll, scour the market, see kind of what's available for them in this July, August period. But the top line for what it is right now will be the top line going into the year.
Okay, before we break down the depth chart, tell me a little bit. Well, first of all, are there any other injuries that could affect the team week 1?
Yeah, I mean, the only other one for offense on this list is Najee Harris, who, of course, not necessarily a football injury, but was placed on the NFI list. His agent obviously came out with the statement that he'll be ready week 1. The Chargers haven't necessarily said anything against that, but kind of a believe it when I see it situation, considering, we are at August 11th. He has not participated in a team practice or anything like that since August 16th, 17th, when the Chargers got into, July 16th, 17th, when the Chargers got into camp earlier before everyone else. So certainly think it's possible he could be ready for week 1, but the clock is ticking in terms of getting him those practice reps and actually making sure that he's ready. If Najee Harris did have to miss week 1 on the NFI injury, then he would miss 4 weeks.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of the rule. They're similar to IR and how that works before the season. And then as you see with the other running backs that have been competing this preseason, while Najee, has not been practicing, Kamani Vidal, Hassan Haskins, Raheem Sanders, Jarrett Patterson, and Naheem Miller-Hines, in a world where Najee misses those first 4 games, are all guys that, can take up 3 of maybe the 4 running back spots in a world behind Omarion Hampton potentially to open the season.
Is that it? Nobody on defense since the looks like the top 2 guys on offense.
Yeah, mostly offense. I mean, a couple nicks and bruises here, but nothing that right now looks like it's going to be affecting week 1.
One significant. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about rookies. Because the last time we talked, we were talking about free agency, rookies, especially the draft. And what have you heard so far about the rookies? Is there anybody that is basically, who do you think has been the most standout rookies at this point? And is there a couple of guys that are just maybe behind the rest?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about guys that are behind the rest, I think Branson Taylor is someone that's kind of like a project tackle guard that they took in the 6th round. Outside of that, offensively, I think you've heard very positive things about the weapons that they drafted. Omarion Hampton, obviously, in the 1st round, who's right now their running back 1, and could enter the season very well that way, assuming Najee Harris remains on the NFI list. And then, of course, it's been a really good camp for Trey Harris and Kadri Lambert-Smith, whose stock keeps elevating week after week. And Rondé Gadsden, I think, has been kind of the big surprise of training camp, if you want to say so far. He just has made continuous explosive plays, whether it's Herbert, Heineke, Lance throwing in the ball. He continues to really impress, I think, in this camp so far.
Okay. And let's see. Nothing yet from the guys on defense. Have you heard anything there? Or has anybody, again, as I mentioned, have you heard anything where it just sounds like I'm not hearing enough out of these guys, or anything like that?
Kyle Kennard would be the one where I'm not quite hearing enough. Just they're a little thin in the edge room, to the point where someone like Caleb Murphy, actually behind him on the depth chart, could end up making the team. He's put together some preseason performances that have been pretty good. Mickens and Caldwell, they drafted for defensive help, obviously. I think they've had really solid preseason debuts in these first 2 games. And Triquez Bridges was their 7th round corner, who I think generally has been competitive in practices, but not so much in the game so far. Did get a little burnt yesterday in the second preseason game, but I think in terms of immediate contributors from this group, I do think you're probably looking at, so far, given how they played in the preseason, I think you're looking at Jamari Caldwell and RJ Mickens from this year's draft.
Okay. Now, as far as the CFAs, and there were a bunch here. These are the ones in teal. And then we also, of course, have some on offense. Are any of the CFAs making any noise? Like, is it like, you know what? I think if I had to predict right now, which if a CFA made the team, this is the one guy or two that I would look at.
I think on defense, it really goes down to the cornerbacks that they've got. Nico Reed played really, really well in the first preseason game. Did not play in the second, but he's been getting consistent second team reps. He's worked his way up from undrafted free agent range. Eric Rogers of Rutgers did have 2 interceptions yesterday. Unfortunately, also suffered an injury towards the end of the game, but he's been playing really well. Really, all their UDFA rookie DBs have been playing pretty solid football. So those are the ones that I would point to, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. And then I think you scroll up to offense here. The one UDFA that I think potentially has a chance to make the roster is Raheem Sanders, running back out of South Carolina, who had a good game yesterday, was hurt for a little bit in the preseason, but finally got a chance to play. Did not practice for a lot of training camp, but finally got a chance to play in the preseason game. Played pretty well, had a touchdown yesterday. So certainly has thrown himself in the mix for one of those running back spots if Najee Harris can't start the season for sure.
Okay, now let's run through the depth chart here, starting at quarterback. So Herbert, what are they trying to do now this year? I'm hearing about him, trying to run the ball more. Maybe that's what he wants to do to his game. That puts him in situations you probably don't want to be putting him in. But is that what you're hearing as well? Do you how? And it might be fantasy fans that might be tuning in too, that might want to know a little bit more about that. But overall, what do you think that he needs to do better as well? What does he have to do to improve himself?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be necessarily more running than usual, or necessarily more designed runs, because I think it could be more than last year, just because Herbert started the season injured last year. So I think from the very beginning, they were kind of advised against it. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than the beginning of last season, just because the quarterback run game was a complete non-starter for them, just because Herbert was injured. As far as what he needs to do better, I think that, just based off of the Texans game tape, I think when he is under pressure in those situations, particularly when the offensive line isn't holding up particularly well, I think those are the situations where you just kind of want to see him throw a ball away instead of, he obviously does not turn over the ball a lot in the regular season. He threw more interceptions in that Houston game than he did all of the regular season. But those moments where the offensive line, I think, is giving up some pressure are the ones where you kind of want to see him, instead of trying to extend the play or throw a dangerous ball, just kind of, live to play another down a little bit and throw it away. I think that based on the Houston game, as well as his touch on some passes, that's the thing that I think, if you're pointing to a couple things, it could improve with Herbert.
Okay. And of course, with Hampton in the backfield, we know how explosive he's going to be. That's an exciting player to have back there. You mentioned some of those other runners, including Sanders. If Harris is not available, is there a definite number 2?
Right now, based off of training camp and the preseason, I think that would be Kamani Vidal, who they drafted last year, has been taking consistent first team reps behind Omarion Hampton on third down a lot for the team, certainly in training camp. Had a good first game, played pretty well yesterday. So right now he's the clubhouse leader, and I don't think he has it locked up that he would be the RB2 if Najee were to be absent, but I think he certainly has been with how active he is on special teams, with how improved he's been as a blocker, certainly, I think the favorite. Also, just given his time in the system as well.
Okay. And do you think Haskins or Sanders has the better chance to unseat Vidal at number 2 in that situation?
I would probably say, if we're just talking about purely unseating him as a number 2, that it would be Sanders with some of his athleticism that he has. But I do think Haskins will make the roster in any event, just because they really trust him from the special teams and blocking standpoint. He was kind of their specialist doing a lot of that stuff last year, particularly on kick returns, used as a blocker on certain downs. So this, obviously, he's a Michigan man. This Harbaugh staff loves him. I don't think he'll be like RB2 or RB3, but I think he will find a spot on the roster as RB4, just as sort of the guy who will do a lot of the dirty work, particularly in the running back room.
Okay, you mentioned Gadsden, a tight end, and so he's off to a great start. We know Conklin is like one of those vets that's just a reliable, your average, solid receiving tight end, but nothing special. And Disley sure looked the part last year when he was healthy. So, and of course, remember, we talked about it last year is when he was the highest free agent. He got the biggest deal from free agency for the Chargers, and it wasn't much, but that just shows you where they were last year. So this is a good 3-man room now. Definitely looks like that, and that's again what Harbaugh wants. So it's really, all of a sudden, it's looking good. By the end of the year, what do you think it's going to look like percentage-wise? Do you think Gadsden has a serious chance to get the second most snaps?
I do think he has a serious chance, just based off of, again, what he's shown in this camp, what he can do as a pass catcher. Definitely will have to get there as a blocker. He's a former wide receiver.
That's true.
He's a former wide receiver convert from Syracuse. So in the last couple of years, he's gone from, playing wide receiver 190 to being a tight end now at 250. So just there's some natural things that I think he'll learn, certainly as, his time in the NFL goes on. But to me, the upside long-term that I think he provides you over a Conklin or over a Disley is pretty notable. I think that'll kind of trend, as the season goes on. You'll see Gadsden getting certainly more involved. And I think overall, this is a really good tight end room in terms of Disley not being the only offensive option that they kind of have now. I thought he kind of got overworked a little bit last year, where every screen, everything was just kind of designed for him because, Hayden Hurst didn't work out. And so they sort of needed more pass catching options to kind of, I think, take the stress off of Disley a little bit. And so I thought that, what they did this offseason in the room was pretty solid.
Okay. All right. Wide receiver. We know McConkey had a huge breakout as a rookie last year. And you mentioned the 2 rookies look good so far in camp. We know Keenan Allen. Well, again, the thing with Keenan Allen, of course, is his age, and he's got to stay healthy and all that. And then also Quentin Johnson. You never know what you're going to get out of Johnston from the last couple of years. He's got a catch. We know that. There's also a lot of talent there. So what's the latest? What's the latest as far as, is Keenan Allen all ready to go? And what about Johnston?
Yeah, Keenan Allen kind of showed up back to practice like nothing had happened, or he never left. He, I think already has that built-in chemistry with Herbert, obviously. A little bit of a down year for him in Chicago, but I think overall his role in this offense, he's not going to be expected to be, 2022, 2023 Keenan Allen, right? Like, I think, he understands Ladd is the top guy, certainly in the room right now. They've drafted, Trey Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith to be contributors. Quentin Johnston is still a favorite of the coaching staff too. I think he'll get his chances to still prove himself in that room. But I think instead of 2023, where Keenan Allen was very clearly the Chargers wide receiver 1, he comes into this room being, kind of a piece rather than, the offense, right?
Yeah. Big difference, huh? Last time he was here?
Yeah, big difference, I think, in terms of what the expectations for him are, both on the field and, what his contract says financially. So, I think that, he's certainly going to have a connection with Herbert. But obviously, Ladd comes in off of last year as your wide receiver one. And I think it'll be, kind of a mix of all of these options behind Ladd. But Keenan, obviously, you can't discount his chances to make fantasy noise and all that stuff with just his familiarity with Justin Herbert and how good he is as a route runner.
Well, I know it's, believe it or not, still even a little bit early, but as far as the preseason, if you had to guess, who do you think will end up with who do you think would be the second most productive wide receiver on the team?
I still would go with Trey Harris right now. Hasn't made a ton of noise in this preseason, but has made consistent noise in camp. I think he has, a connection with Herbert, particularly when those two were on the field together in training camp. And, he was the number 1 yards per route run wide receiver in college football last year, 5.2. To me, this is a guy who can be a difference maker day one when they ask him to be. So I think he's going to be a factor much sooner rather than later. If it was Keenan Allen, it wouldn't surprise me if he was the second most, productive receiver in the room because he's Keenan Allen. But considering what they've invested in Trey Harris and how he's looked in camp so far, I think I would go with him.
Yeah, this is like the deepest this receiver room has been in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Joe Ortiz deserves a lot of credit for, continuing to upgrade the room also, right? Obviously, Mike Williams was on this roster, and then he got hurt, right? And they called Keenan Allen, right? Like, I think the fact that they, they spent 2 draft picks on this room, Ladd last year, obviously. They've invested not necessarily paying a Devontae Adams or a DK Metcalf contract, but they keep investing, I think, a lot of resources into this room just because they know what the offense was last year was not necessarily good enough.
Okay, so if do you think the room is fairly set? Is there a surprise at all? Do you think they're going to keep 7 or 6?
I think I would go with 6 because you have Ladd, Keenan, Trey, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Quentin Johnston, and then Darius Davis is like your special teams returner type. So I think he'll be on the roster for that reason. And then everyone else is kind of, I think, competing for those practice squad spots.
And none of those guys is there out of the 3rd, 4th, 5th group there is anybody ahead of the rest?
I think Rager is a guy they like. He, contributed a lot on special teams last year, was a practice squad elevation guy. Dalvin Campbell has really impressed so far in preseason, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was a guy that got a practice squad spot, had a big 50-plus yard catch yesterday in the game. So I think he's someone that you can look at in that capacity as well. But I think as far as the practice squad spots, still to be determined in these last 2 preseason games to see, who makes kind of the most impact there.
Okay. Is the offensive line room set, or is there to be a competition with a couple of guys to see who makes the team?
I think the room is mostly set. I think, like we said, could they go, as the rosters get cut down and get in like a swing tackle here or there? I don't think that's impossible. But Harbaugh said he was pretty sure Bradley Bozeman's going to be the center over Zion Johnson. So I think Zion's going to stay at left guard. That was kind of a brief competition this offseason. But I think that line from left tackle to right tackle is going to be the line week 1.
Is that something that if Bozeman does not, say, impress them enough this year, that it's possible that Johnson becomes the starting center at some point, and they're hoping that Taylor that just moves in?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Zion's also on an expiring contract as well.
Okay.
Bozeman's technically on a 2-year deal, but he doesn't have any, real money necessarily after this year. So kind of a contract year for really both of them in terms of their roles on the team this year. I think with Zion, it was just more, let's, train him at center. And then,
Okay.
for example, if Bradley Bozeman gets injured week 1, right, that's like another option that you kind of have on the table as far as, cross training and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I never really bought that it was a competition in a
Okay.
series.
So you look at what Salyer, Taylor, James, and then who else? Barnhart, is he definitely coming in?
I would say right now, if talking about the depth linemen, it
Yeah.
would
If they
be
don't bring in someone from the outside, yeah.
yeah. Salyer, James is your backup center right now. Salyer would be your backup guard, if you will. Still think they could go out and kind of find a swing tackle, like we said. I guess for the time being, that would be someone like a David Sharp, just because they activated Pipkins. But interesting ways this could go. Not as set in stone there at like the swing
Okay.
spot compared to backup guard, backup center.
So do you think Salyer should be, is he more of a guard now? I know he can play both, but
Yeah.
do you think he is a guard?
Yeah, so I think they pretty much he played left tackle yesterday in the preseason game, but has been pretty much training at guard.
Okay.
I think if there were to be an injury to Trey Pipkins or Joe Alt at this point, and kind of in the vein of what they did with moving Alt to left tackle, right? If there were another injury to one of those tackle spots, I think Jamari would be a guy that they would consider moving into, like, say, Joe Alt's spot if he got hurt, or Trey Pipkins' spot if he got hurt. So
Okay.
he's also kind of, in a way, also their swing tackle, in addition to being backup guard.
Yeah. Which is why, like you said, they might be interested in bringing someone in for that swing job. Do any of those CFAs have a chance to make the team?
No.
Okay. That was quick. All right. Let's move over to defense, and we will start first of all up front. So talk about the defensive line. Of course, they lost Puna Ford, but they drafted Caldwell. And what do you think they did overall as far as this line is concerned in the offseason, and who needs to step up?
Yeah, I think with losing Puna Ford, it's kind of replacing him with multiple guys, right? With Taylor Tart, who they bring back, Deshaun Hand, Naquan Jones, as well as Jamari Caldwell. I think all kind of stepping up in that spot. Just I think Boydby is another guy that they kind of expect another leap out of this year. Their 4th round pick from last year. So Otito Ogbonya has also been a pretty hot fixture in the building. I think they expect more from him this year. So I'd say overall it's less one player that I think will step up and more just the whole room kind of coming together and trying to replace some of that production they lost when Puna Ford did go to the Rams.
And is there, I know they brought in Hand, but is there, again, because you lose a player like that, you hope at some point another player can take that next step. Is there someone on that defensive line that you think that could do that?
Yeah, they like it. Boydby, who I think put on 20 or 30 pounds this offseason, right? It takes a while to kind of adjust the defensive line in the league. So I think he's a guy that'll be in there. Otito Ogbonya will also be kind of that mindset as well. And so far this offseason, I've been really impressed with what Jamari Caldwell has shown in these 2 preseason games, and I think he's going to play significant snaps sooner rather than later.
Okay, that sounds good. Now we'll talk about the pass rush. So we talked about Kennard, because Dupree, just one of these veterans that hangs around. He does his job. But Mac, that's the big deal there. He's still getting old, but he's still producing. Thule is an easy way out. He's the guy that I know that you've talked about the last couple of years. I remember even last year, he was developing, and not too many people outside of LA probably realize that. So this is a big year for him, right? They're hoping that he takes that next step.
Yeah, I think obviously without Bosa, the pressure kind of is on Thule in that regard. But I also think it'll just be, Mac plus, all these guys kind of being able to be requisite pass rushers. Haven't been terribly impressed with what I've seen with Kennard this preseason to this point, but I do think Caleb Murphy is a guy that if they do keep a fifth edge, I do think that's a name. While we're talking about not a UDFA this year, but one last year, who I think could make the team. So I think it'll just be, instead of necessarily one guy replacing Bosa, obviously they expect Tuli to make a leap, but outside of that, kind of just, pass rush guys to fill those holes.
Okay. Inside, Henley made a big move in year 2. Yeah. What about Junior Colson? Are they expecting a lot from him this year?
Right now, I would say it's Deion Henley and Denzel Perriman are your top 2 linebackers. I think they expect more out of Colson. Sort of been an interesting preseason for him. I don't think he didn't play yesterday because he was injured, I believe. Not the greatest Hall of Fame game to go off of. But overall, I think in the linebacker room, they are pretty set with the guys they have in Deion. Denzel Perriman is your top 2, and then sort of a mix of the other guys there, including Troy Dye, Junior Colson, Delshon Phillips as kind of your special teams linebacker. So I think they're pretty set with that group, hoping Junior can take another step, but I don't think they're necessarily banking on it being this year. I do think Denzel is still clearly one of the top 2 guys.
And in that secondary, what do you think? Last year, they had some young guys step up, and that was huge for them. So what about this year? How's the secondary looking?
Pretty much the same. I think the safety room is really solid with what they brought in. They bring in R.J. Mickens in the draft. They have Tony Jefferson, who's someone who's their 4th or 5th safety, but is still like a really good player in the league. That top trio is Jesse Minter's favorite with Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, and Elijah Molden. So I think they're pretty set as far as the safety room is concerned. Corner, I think, will be a little bit more piecing things together, but Cam Hart and Tarheeb still took really big steps last year. They bring in Dante Jackson from the Steelers in free agency, and I think they just hope kind of to have enough guys. Derwin James is also someone who's going to play a lot of slot corner. He primarily made an all-pro team last year off of playing slot corner more than he was actually a safety.
Okay.
So he'll figure into that mix as well based on how Jesse Minter kind of uses his personnel. But overall, I think they're pretty happy with the guys they have in the secondary. Certainly the most sure thing, I think, of their defense right now.
All right. And does that mean that none of the CFAs or, any of those other players, 7th round draft pick, does anybody have a chance to make the team?
I kind of saw Triquez's chances to make the team right now, just based on the fact that, they have a lot of DBs. It's actually been really competitive with Eric Rogers and Nico Reed. Nico Reed is the one, if I had to pick one CFA to kind of make it on defense, it would probably be him. Was really impressive in the Hall of Fame game, has consistently made plays throughout training camp. So I think Nico Reed out of Oregon is the one that I would watch to potentially make the team.
And as you said, too, Eric Rogers looked good before the injury. So maybe he's a practice squad guy or something like that. That's real possible.
Yeah.
Any of these other defenders, CFA guys, have a chance to at least be good on the practice squad and potentially more?
Potentially more, yeah. If there's I think Miles Purchase, again, was another CFA who had a really good Hall of Fame game, played pretty well yesterday in the preseason game. A lot of depth, I think, particularly with their corners and how the undrafted guys have played. Definitely the most bright spot of their UDFA lineup.
Okay, how is special teams looking right now? We know Dicker, when he's healthy, is as good as you can pretty much hope for at this point, correct?
Yeah, pretty much running back the same group from last year, Dicker, Scott, and Harris at the kicker, long snapper, and punter spots. And then I think really from there, Darius Davis is still your return man. And then they also will probably work in Keandre Leopard-Smith into a couple of returns here and there. And like I mentioned, I think why Hassan Haskins, who we talked about earlier, has a spot on this team is just because of how involved he is in the return game and special teams in general.
Okay, give me a breakout player on both sides of the ball. Somebody that from last year's team that you think could make a
Mm.
step up, and for any reason.
Yeah, from last year's team, I would go on offense. I would go with Kamani Vidal, who again has this opportunity now, uh, kind of with Najee Harris maybe missing these first 4 games, has a chance to make some plays behind Omarion Hampton, kind of like when Austin Eckler got the chance a couple of years ago when Melvin Gordon held out. I think there is a chance here for Vidal to shine at RB2. So I would maybe go with him, even though Hampton's going to be obviously way more high volume. On defense, if I have to pick a player who was here last year that I think takes a step, I think I would go with Otito Ogbonya. I think he was very solid, so far in the training camp preseason process. Finally getting past the patellar tendon injury he had a couple years ago. So certainly looks a little bit closer to athletically being himself. Not sure exactly how many reps he's going to have relative to the rest of the defensive line room, but I think he's someone that has shown pass rush upside before.
Okay, before I let you go, I'm going to take a look at what Vegas believes regarding the Chargers. So let's take a look at what they have. I believe first of all, they have them at 28-1 to win the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
They have them as the third choice in the West at plus 330. What do you think about that, being the third choice in the West at 330?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of expected, I think, with what the Broncos added this offseason. They were kind of neck and neck with the Chargers last year, but I think it made more draft picks, more moves to kind of like bolster their stock, at least, as far as sports books are concerned. And then, of course, I think it would be a little bit closer neck and neck between those teams if the Chargers obviously didn't have their Sean Slater injury happen. But I get why the betting markets would see the Chargers as third rather than second. But okay. I think that AFC West is just going to be a dogfight this year. I think every team legitimately got better. I think the Chiefs got better. The Chargers, I think, have made offseason improvements. The Broncos, obviously. And then I think even the Raiders, who obviously were the very clear fourth-place team last year, they get Geno Smith in there. Pete Carroll brings a lot of stability. So I expect them not necessarily to win the division or make a playoff spot, but I think they're going to be a much more respectable team for the Chiefs and the Broncos and the Chargers to go up against than they were last year.
Yeah, and speaking of the division, that's exactly how they opened the season. And of course, they get the opportunity to open the season with the Chiefs in Brazil. I'm not sure who's excited about that other than the people in Brazil. But yeah, so what do you think about the schedule? Keeping in mind that their win total, let me pop it up right here. The win total for the Chargers is 9.5 at minus 105, under 9.5 at minus 115. So based on the schedule, what do you think? Have you finalized where you think that they're going to land as far as their wins?
I was on 10 before the Rashawn Slater injury, but man, I kind of could go between 10 and 9. So I think it's actually a very good Vegas line right now, sadly. But yeah, I mean, I think they start their season kind of with a gauntlet stretch here that I think will determine whether they are kind of a wild card contender or a real division contender. They got Chiefs, Raiders, and Broncos. There's not much more you could say about that. That's one of the more insane stretches, just to not necessarily in terms of difficulty, but either you're going to be 3-0 by week 3 and you're on top of the AFC West, or you're kind of out of the division almost by week 3 too. So I think very, very big stretch of games that will determine kind of whether they can be a top end playoff team or whether they kind of are in the wild card contention more so again win those first 3 games.
Yeah, it looks like at least after those 3 games, it looks like before the bye, it's not bad.
It clears up a little bit, I think, for them.
Yes, you get the Giants, you get the Dolphins, you get the Colts, you get the Titans, you
Yeah.
get the Jags. Then it gets tough again after the bye.
Right.
Because you got to go with the Eagles, the Chiefs, Cowboys could be decent. They're on the road.
Yeah.
And then Houston to end the season at Denver. I mean, that's so it's pretty much it's tough early, tough late, and you got definitely the meat of the schedule, which is the part at least where there's a lot of opportunity to gobble up some wins.
Yeah, got to take advantage of that middle stretch. Otherwise, if they don't take advantage of the first 3 games and then they start maybe having some injuries late entering that stretch that starts with the Eagles, then that's where you sort of start to hit the under on the Vegas odds. But I do think this is a more difficult schedule than they had last year for sure, but also still pretty reasonable, I think, with the talent they have been able to add.
Let's see, they've got the Raiders, of course. Week 2 is a primetime game. Week 8 against the Vikings is prime time. And then you got another primetime one against the Steelers. So what do you think about the primetime games this year, which also include the Philadelphia Eagles in week 14?
Yeah, the Chiefs week 1 too is also.
That's true. Yeah, that's right.
Standalone in Brazil.
Back to back.
Yeah, back-to-back primetime games. I don't like staying up late, but I will.
Yeah, I know, right? As a reporter, it's close.
I will make a sacrifice and stay up till God knows what time. But I think overall for them, it's obviously reflective of the season that they had last year, and then the markets and the media being in on them as a result of them taking us another step in the second year of Jim Harbaugh.
So now you're kind of wondering whether or not you're looking more like 9. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think I was kind of on 10-7 at first and pretty firmly hitting the over. I think with the Slater injury, I think that does probably cost you a game at some point if Pipkins doesn't play great one week, right? Like that could be the difference between Herbert.
What a disappointment that would be to be 9-8.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that depends on who you're asking. Because to me, their 11-6 record was a little bit fake last year. Not necessarily fake, but they played a 4th place schedule. They played the Saints. They played a bunch of teams that kind of had non-competitive quarterback situations later in the year and built up those wins. I think they could be a better team this year, but because their schedule is also harder, I think it will even out a little bit instead of, a lot of people expect them maybe to be like the 12, 13 win team after they won 11 last year. But I think you just look at the schedule as well as, some of the setbacks they've had with Slater. And that's where I sort of pump the brakes on them, jumping to that Super Bowl level this year.
Wow. Okay. So right now it looks like you're right around 9-8, but you can still change your mind before the season begins.
Yeah, still have time.
Positive or negative, depending on, of course, any more injuries.
If Rashawn Slater gets a new patella tendon, I can change my mind before the season starts. So
yeah, that's true too. Unlikely, but that's true too.
Never know.
All right, Alex, awesome job as always. I really appreciate you getting us up to speed for the Chargers for the upcoming season. And it's a very entertaining schedule, which means I certainly hope that you're going to have a really good year, or at least a good enough year where because anytime you have a quarterback like that and a coach like that, and in the West, I mean, fans outside of the West just want to see some team, whether it's the Chargers or Denver, get in there and give the Chiefs a whole lot of problems. We're sick of seeing the Chiefs winning the AFC West, just like just like the Chargers fans are.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll talk to you during the season. And in the meantime, again, we've got links in the description where you can follow Alex and everything going on with the Chargers and your show. You do it once a week. And then you also have a show that comes out usually 24 hours pretty much after the games each week.
Yep. Over on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. Check out both breakdowns there.
Excellent. And again, links in the description for all that stuff. Alex, appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great season.
Thank you, Greg.
You got it. All right. So that is it for our coverage for the LA Chargers. Again, Alex Insdorf covers the Chargers for Bolt Beat. It's a fan-sided affiliation. That's a lot better than what I said in the beginning of the show. And I also co-host the Chargers Guilty as Charged podcast. So check that out. And this is, I believe, the very first interview that we've done in the AFC West. We have the Kansas City Chiefs coming up real soon. And I believe we're still going to be having Denver on Fridays, I think. So now the Raiders, it's up in the air. And we'll talk to the Raiders at some point. But if you want to know what's going on with the rest of the AFC West, just check us out here. Subscribe to the channel. Also, check out ourlads.com. They do a great job as always. You looked at the depth chart. Nobody does a better job than our lads with the depth charts. And of course, if you're into the NFL draft, check that out as well over at ourlads.com. So again, thanks to Alex Insdorf. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in here to the Our Lads Football Network, and we'll see you